It's such a wonderful machine to fly because it turns, slip, side slip, do all of the things that you had to do in combat so easily.
I'm very proud of the fact that I was involved in the design and the development of the aircraft.
It is the most beautiful aircraft I have ever flown in my life, and it was a fighter.
The Supermarine Spitfire, a powerful symbol of defiance and victory during the Battle of Britain. Fast, agile, and beautifully sleek, the Spitfire represented the cutting edge of RAF fighter command in its legendary fight against Hitler's Luftwaffe. With over 23,000 Spitfires produced, it was the only Allied fighter to stay in production throughout the entire war. The aircraft's design was so advanced that development continued through 24 marked numbers, most of which entered actual production. Few Spitfire variants were unsuccessful, a rare achievement in fighter development history. Supermarine and Rolls-Royce collaborated so closely that only two engine types, the Rolls-Royce Merlin and Griffin, powered the Spitfire. The diversity of roles the Spitfire performed during World War II exceeded all expectations. It served as a fast interceptor, high and low altitude reconnaissance plane, and tactical fighter bomber, proving the brilliance of its original design. Yet, the Spitfire's inception was risky. While the Hawker Hurricane reflected traditional aircraft construction, the Spitfire was a revolutionary design, born from the genius of one of aviation's greatest designers. Reginald Mitchell, chief designer at Supermarine, gained fame by creating high-performance seaplanes that won the Schneider Speed Trials for Britain 3 times between 1929 and 1931.
Mitchell was a brilliant designer. He was a very, very good leader. He was an easy man to get on with. He did have his occasional flare-ups, but one of his main advantages was that he was able to pick the right people to do the job.
Soon after, Mitchell's S-6B Racer, the fastest of his designs, set a world record by reaching 407 miles per hour.
As a man, I liked him enormously and respected him because he was tremendously
fighter, drawing on his experience from the Schneider Cup races. The same specification F-730 for a new RAF fighter to replace the Bristol Bulldog, which then equipped most of Britain's air defense units. Mitchell's answer was the Supermarine Type 224. This all-metal aircraft, powered by a 600 horsepower Rolls-Royce Ghost engine, proved slow and unreliable, leading to the 730 competition being won by the Gloucester SS-37 biplane, later known as the Gloucester Gladiator. The Ministry's choice of a biplane was a significant setback for Mitchell and those who saw the future of fighter aircraft in high-speed monoplanes. During a convalescence trip to Germany in 1933, after a major operation, Mitchell realized the urgent need for an advanced British fighter. With Adolf Hitler in power and the Nazi Party controlling Germany, the threat of rearmament loomed large. Mitchell believed that if Germany rearmed, it would heavily prioritize aircraft. Germany, perhaps more than any other nation, had become fascinated with aviation. The Graf Zeppelin had flown around the world, while the massive 12-engine Dornier DOX crossed both the North and South Atlantic. German aviators were celebrated as symbols of a national revival. The number of trained German airmen was increasing rapidly. 50,000 young Germans were members of gliding clubs, and Lufthansa, the state airline, was heavily subsidized. Its domestic services alone surpassed the global operations of all British and French airlines combined. Mitchell concluded that German rearmament would produce the most formidable air force in Europe. Conversations with young German aviators convinced him that Adolf Hitler would inevitably lead the country to war. For Mitchell, this realization sparked a relentless determination. Upon returning home, despite medical advice, he immediately returned to his drawing board. Every ounce of Mitchell's energy was now dedicated to creating a new fighter aircraft. He based his design around a highly promising engine being developed by Rolls-Royce. Derived from the R-series engines of the Schneider racers, the 1,025 horsepower PV-12, later renamed the Merlin, was central to Mitchell's plan.
He started to design an aircraft to his own ideas, which had 8 guns firing forward. It had an enclosed cockpit, retractable undercarriage, and all of the produced something with a very high speed. He had also introduced the concept of stressed skin construction, where in fact instead of just making a structure which was self-supporting of its own and then putting plating on it, the external plating actually took some of the stress as well. And that lesson was carried on into the design of what became the Spitfire.
His prototype fighter K5054 was completed well before Rolls-Royce resolved several cooling system issues. However, on March 5, 1936, K5054 made its maiden flight.
Office and said I wanted to be a pilot. And he said, well, you can't volunteer to be a pilot. He said, you can volunteer to be air crew. And he said, and if you're good enough, you might become a pilot. So I said, all right, I'll volunteer for air crew. So he said, right, well, what's your name and address and what does your father do and what's your job? So I said, well, I work at Supermarine. So he said, what do you do at Supermarine? I said, well, I'm an apprentice. Apprentice, he said. He looked me in the eye and he picked up the piece of paper and he just tore it in half and he said, you go back to work, my son. He said, you're doing a better job there.
Since 1934, the British Air Ministry had been alarmed by intelligence reports indicating Germany was secretly building an air force with a planned strength of 4,000 aircraft. Mitchell's concerns were now fully validated. In response to the growing threat, the RAF initiated a series of rearmament programs. Luckily for Britain, key RAF leaders emerged who believed that, with enough fighters, the German threat, particularly from its fast monoplane bombers, could be neutralized. One such figure was Air Marshal Sir Hugh Dowding, newly appointed as Air Member for Supply and Research, Mitchell's Spitfire. One of the key requirements of the new specification, which would make Britain's next generation of fighters formidable, was that the aircraft be equipped with 8 wing-mounted machine guns. Initially, the Spitfire's stressed metal wing design posed significant manufacturing challenges. The complex techniques and specialized tools needed led to delays, but the end result was more than worth the effort. The curved wing shape maximized surface area for its span and provided exceptional strength where the wing root connected to the fuselage. This design gave the Spitfire its incredible ability to make tight turns without the risk of structural failure. In fact, it could handle combat loadings of up to 9G. Mitchell's innovative wing design also greatly enhanced the Spitfire's speed. Despite accommodating 4 machine guns, the wing was extraordinarily thin, minimizing drag. The low thickness-to-chord ratio made the Spitfire exceptionally stable during high-speed dives. Pilots who first flew the new aircraft were amazed by its performance, exceeding 300 miles per hour, and by how easily it could be flown, even by newcomers to the plane. Its stall characteristics in particular were forgiving, a crucial advantage in aerial combat. The test pilots were so impressed by the Spitfire prototype that even before its 7-day trial ended, and without a formal report, the Air Ministry placed an order for 310 aircraft. The first production Spitfire, K9787, took to the skies on May 14, 1938. Sadly, Reginald Mitchell did not live to witness Britain's confidence in his creation. In poor health and weakened by his efforts, Mitchell died of tuberculosis in June 1937 at the age of 42.
Mitchell's death certainly had quite an impact on the people in the design department. And I remember, in fact, the day that he died, Black and I were working in the laboratory on something, I don't know what now. We both sort of stopped what we were doing, looked at one another, silenced for a bit, then got on with the job.
In August 1938, the first production Spitfires were delivered to the RAF's 19th Squadron at Duxford for evaluation. These early models were powered by the Merlin II engine and featured a two-bladed fixed-pitch wooden propeller. They could reach 352 miles per hour at 19,000 feet and had a maximum climb rate of 2,420 feet per minute and could ascend to 20,000 feet in 9.4 minutes. Despite this impressive performance, it did not yet fully harness the Merlin engine's potential. After the 78th Spitfire rolled off the production line, the de Havilland Hamilton two-pitch, three-bladed metal propeller became standard, optimized for both takeoff and cruising. The Spitfire's takeoff distance was significantly reduced, but it wasn't until the summer of 1940, with the introduction of constant-speed propellers, that the Merlin engine could truly deliver its best performance. To accommodate the constant-speed propeller from the 175th Spitfire onwards, a modified engine, the Merlin III, was installed. In 1938, despite the boost of British rearmament following the Munich crisis, Spitfire production remained disappointingly low. Only 3 squadrons were equipped with the new fighter that year. Even with larger numbers of the slower but easier to produce Hurricane, Britain had only a fraction of the fighter force needed for sufficient home defense. That minimum fighter force was based on the assumption that Fighter Command would need to maintain continuous standing patrols during any conflict. However, standing patrols might not be necessary. Although still in its infancy, radar promised to revolutionize air defense. Air Chief Marshal Sir Hugh Dowding, now head of Fighter Command, played a pivotal role in establishing Britain's radar defense network. The backbone of Dowding's system was a series of radar stations known as Chain Home, capable of detecting enemy aircraft approaching the British coast from 40 miles away. However, exercises revealed that Chain Home could not detect low-flying aircraft. To address this, a second network called Chain Home Low was established, capable of detecting aircraft flying just above sea level from a distance of 30 miles. Together, these networks formed the world's first air defense radar system. Dowding's challenge was converting radar detections into actionable intelligence for directing Spitfires and Hurricanes. To solve this, he created filter centers tasked with distinguishing friendly aircraft from enemy ones. By taking cross bearings from 2 nearby stations, they could estimate the course of incoming intruders. Radar operators and plotters, often members of the Women's Auxiliary Air Force, became highly skilled at estimating target ranges, bearings, altitudes, and even numbers. Interceptions were controlled from plotting rooms at sector, group, and fighter command levels. Since the radar defense network couldn't track enemy aircraft once they crossed the British coast and moved inland, tens of thousands of observers were trained to report sightings of enemy aircraft in their sectors. This information was then relayed to Observer Corps headquarters at the appropriate filter center. Dowding's aim in designing such a complex detection and plotting system was to maximize the chances that every Spitfire and Hurricane sent into the air would intercept the enemy. All flights would be directly combat-related. His defensive network was completed just in time. On September 1st, 1939, Hitler's armies invaded Poland. As the Luftwaffe struck the Polish Air Force, destroying most of its fighters on the ground, and German bombers crippled Polish communications, it became evident that this was a new kind of warfare. Blitzkrieg tactics, where fast-moving armored units coordinated with a powerful air force, were a terrifying revelation. Over 700 miles from the battlefront, Britain could do nothing to aid its Polish allies. France, with the most powerful army in Europe and a shared border with Germany, was in a better position but failed to act decisively. Within weeks, Poland's defeat was inevitable. On November 18, 1939, 6 weeks after Poland's fall, the Supermarine Spitfire made its first mission over German territory. Ironically, this mission was in a role for which the Spitfire was never originally designed, but one in which it excelled: high-speed, high-altitude reconnaissance. Stripped of guns and ammunition, the RAF's reconnaissance Spitfires could soar to 35,000 feet, well beyond the reach of German flak, and fly faster than any enemy fighter. They swiftly transformed British photographic intelligence operations. By the end of 1939, in just 15 sorties, 2 Spitfires had covered 5,000 square miles of enemy territory without any losses. This marked the beginning of the Spitfire's distinguished career as one of the war's finest photographic reconnaissance aircraft. On May 10, 1940, the storm of Blitzkrieg struck France and the Low Countries. The offensive commenced with over 300 German bombers attacking 22 Allied airfields in northern France, Belgium, and Holland. The Belgian and Dutch air forces were obliterated on the ground, while the French faced significant damage. The next day, it was the RAF's airfields in France that came under attack. Despite facing relentless air assaults, the Hawker Hurricanes of the British Expeditionary Forces Air Component fought valiantly against overwhelming odds. The effect of the Hurricanes in slowing the Luftwaffe offensive was disproportionate to their numbers. However, with 1,000 Allied aircraft destroyed in just 2 days and the French Air Force retreating to relative safety in the interior, defeat seemed inevitable. After the dramatic breakthrough by German armor at Sedan, which bypassed the defenses of the Maginot Line, the ground war was effectively lost. The French government implored for additional British fighters, but Sir Hugh Dowding, aware that any further losses would render Britain's future defense a hopeless endeavor, stubbornly resisted. Events quickly proved Dowding's judgment correct. By May 20th, France had been divided in two by a powerful German armored thrust. The British Expeditionary Force, along with the bulk of the French 1st and 7th Armies, found themselves trapped in a shrinking pocket around Dunkirk. The last RAF airfield in Belgium had already been abandoned. As German armor closed in on Dunkirk, the fate of 300,000 Allied soldiers seemed almost sealed. Yet, on May 24th, Hitler ordered his panzers to halt. Hermann Göring, chief of the Luftwaffe, buoyed by his victories, had assured Hitler that the German Air Force could, unaided, eliminate the remnants of the expeditionary force at Dunkirk. For the destruction of the Allied stronghold, the Luftwaffe assembled 300 bombers and 500 fighters, most of which were the formidable Messerschmitt 109E. The 109E was equipped with 2 fuselage-mounted MG-17 machine guns, each carrying 1,000 rounds, and 2 wing-mounted cannons, each with 60 rounds. Powered by the Daimler-Benz 601A engine, the 109E offered a very short takeoff and excellent climb capability. However, its performance at altitudes of 20,000 feet and higher was considerably better. Since the outbreak of the war, the Messerschmitt 109 had dominated the skies over Europe. Pilots of the 109 were convinced that wherever the aircraft engaged in combat, victory was assured. It was with this high confidence that the Luftwaffe set out to destroy the Allies at Dunkirk. What the German airmen had not foreseen was that, over the Dunkirk beaches, the Luftwaffe would encounter significant numbers of RAF Spitfires for the first time. Throughout Operation Dynamo, the evacuation of the British Expeditionary Force from Dunkirk, 16 squadrons of Spitfires and Hurricanes flew at a time to disrupt the German attacks on the port area and the evacuation fleet. In total, 32 RAF squadrons participated in the Dunkirk operation. Despite being able to spend only 15 minutes over the battle zone at combat speeds, the performance of the Supermarine Spitfire came as a severe shock to the Luftwaffe. Here was a fighter aircraft capable of meeting the Messerschmitt 109 on equal terms. It quickly became clear that the Spitfire's ability to outturn the 109 provided a crucial advantage in close combat. Additionally, the Messerschmitt's cannon did not prove to be the devastating weapon that the Luftwaffe had anticipated. Its low muzzle velocity and slow rate of fire often meant that a pass would result in very few rounds actually striking a fast-moving Spitfire. On the British side, the Spitfire pilots discovered that if their guns were harmonized to converge at 200 yards instead of the official 650 yards, their hitting power was more than sufficient to destroy a 109 in a single pass. In one significant regard, the Spitfire was incomparably superior to its German counterpart. The bubble-shaped hood of the Spitfire offered vastly improved all-round visibility, a matter of life and death for a fighter pilot. During the air battles that raged over the Dunkirk beaches, RAF fighters destroyed 132 German aircraft, delivering a devastating blow to Goering's Luftwaffe. Many German attacks did manage to penetrate to the evacuation area and inflict heavy losses on ships and men. But without a doubt, the RAF emerged victorious in the Battle of Dunkirk. At great cost, the RAF had prevented the German bombers from annihilating the British Expeditionary Force along with all of Britain's hopes. Tragically, since the men on the ground had witnessed little of the fierce fighting occurring above them, many concluded that the RAF had abandoned them to their fate. For some time afterward, a significant amount of anger and bitterness developed between the British Army and the RAF pilots. The successful evacuation of 338,000 British and Allied soldiers from Dunkirk marked a turning point in the war. Its impact on British civilian morale was immeasurable, but for the fighter pilots of the RAF, it meant even more. Combat, the only true judge of an aircraft's worth, had proven the Spitfire to be an exceptional warplane. With an attempted invasion of Britain now an impending reality, survival would depend solely on the men and machines of RAF Fighter Command. Within 2 weeks of France's fall, Hitler and his generals began planning the conquest of Britain. Success would hinge primarily on the Luftwaffe winning control of the skies over the Channel and southern England. Hermann Goering, undeterred by his failure at Dunkirk, estimated that it would take only 4 days of intensive air operations by the Luftwaffe to overwhelm Britain's air defenses in the south of England. In just 4 weeks, the RAF could be utterly defeated. In preparation for the campaign, the Luftwaffe assembled 2,800 combat aircraft in France, Denmark, and Norway. Eagle Day, scheduled for early August, was to mark the start of the Great Offensive. Meanwhile, the RAF strength was to be gradually worn down. The bait designed to lure British fighters into costly dogfights with the Luftwaffe consisted of a series of bombing raids on southern English ports and Channel convoys. If the RAF scrambled its fighters to confront the German raiders, they would lose valuable aircraft to the 109 escorts. Conversely, if it chose not to engage, Britain would face significant losses in shipping. The Kanalkampf, as the German High Command dubbed the first phase of the Battle of Britain, began in earnest on July 10, 1940. The first major engagement involved an attack by 20 German bombers and 50 fighters on a convoy codenamed Bread, traversing the Dover Straits. Forewarned by radar, 30 British fighters, including Spitfires from 74 Squadron, intercepted the raiders. Soon after, 6 Spitfires from 64 Squadron joined the fray. In the ensuing dogfights, 3 German bombers were shot down, along with 3 109 fighters. On the British side, the losses included a lone Hurricane and 2 damaged aircraft, while 1 Spitfire made a crash landing. Tragically, 1 RAF pilot lost his life, and only a single ship from the convoy was sunk. For Fighter Command, the outcome of this first day's action was highly satisfactory, setting the stage for the intense battles to come. However, it became evident that adequately protecting all Channel convoys would quickly escalate costs. During the battle in France and over Dunkirk, the RAF had suffered the loss of 477 valuable fighters and nearly as many pilots. Britain now had only 19 squadrons of Spitfires and 29 squadrons of Hurricanes left. With a significant battle looming, Sir Hugh Dowding was determined to conserve his fighter resources, even if that meant allowing British ships to be sunk within sight of the English coast. This decision caused frustration among RAF pilots eager for combat, as future German attacks would be met with only a limited number of fighters. The priority was to focus on destroying German bombers while avoiding engagements with their escorts whenever possible. In the early weeks of the Battle of Britain, Fighter Command's steady accumulation of combat experience led to several valuable modifications for the Spitfire. An increasing number of Spitfires were outfitted with constant speed propellers, enhancing their rate of climb and significantly reducing engine wear. The introduction of the de Wilde incendiary bullet proved to be a valuable asset for marksmanship, greatly increasing the Spitfire's hitting power. Experienced pilots favored a mix of ammunition, loading 2 guns with standard bullets, 2 with armor-piercing rounds, and 2 with incendiary rounds. Many skilled Spitfire pilots believed that using incendiary rounds made the crucial difference between merely damaging an enemy aircraft and shooting it down. In addition to performance enhancements, new Spitfires offered better protection for their pilots. All Spitfires rolling off the production lines were now equipped with armor behind the pilot's seat as standard equipment, improving their chances of survival in the increasingly perilous aerial combat of the Battle of Britain. Just before the war, bulletproof windscreens were introduced for the Spitfires, despite initial reluctance from the Air Ministry. Sir Hugh Dowding, known for his commitment to pilot safety, managed to convince the authorities by arguing that, if bulletproof glass were deemed necessary for Chicago gangsters, it certainly should be for his fighter pilots. These enhancements to the Spitfire were welcomed by the pilots, but there was growing concern about how combat situations were unfolding. The RAF's tactical doctrines, which had remained unchanged since the early 1930s, began to negate many of the Spitfire's inherent advantages. The standard RAF formation was a VIC of 3 aircraft flying in close proximity. This close formation posed a high risk of collision, preventing pilots from effectively scanning their surroundings and taking full advantage of the Spitfire's excellent visibility. As a result, the VIC formations became particularly vulnerable to surprise attacks from enemy aircraft approaching at high speeds from above. Additionally, the tight formation of 3 aircraft was not sustainable during the chaos of aerial combat, often resulting in disintegration as the engagements unfolded. The inability to adapt tactics to the realities of modern air warfare posed a significant challenge for the RAF, especially as the Luftwaffe pressed its advantage. The need for more flexible formations and tactics that leverage the Spitfire's strengths was becoming increasingly apparent. Despite the impressive capabilities of the Spitfire, any pilot flying solo remained exceptionally vulnerable. The Luftwaffe's tactics were significantly more effective for the realities of aerial combat. Their basic formation, known as the Swarm, was a well-spaced finger 4, allowing ample room for maneuvering and maintaining vigilance against enemy threats. In combat scenarios, the Swarm could easily break into flexible pairs, each consisting of a leader and a supporting wingman. By the end of July 1940, after 3 weeks of sporadic engagements over the English Channel and southern England, the RAF had inflicted substantial losses on the Luftwaffe, with 125 German aircraft destroyed. However, the majority of British successes were against German bombers, while the superior tactics employed by Luftwaffe pilots were exacting a toll on RAF fighters. In that same period, 32 Spitfires and 46 Hurricanes were lost, along with the lives of 50 RAF pilots. Despite these losses, changes to British fighter tactics occurred slowly. Many individual commanders began to adapt, moving away from the standard VIC formation in favor of the more effective Swarm. This shift marked a gradual evolution in the RAF's approach to combat, as pilots sought to maximize the advantages of teamwork and coordination in the face of the formidable Luftwaffe. Despite the tactical shortcomings of fighter command during the early weeks of the Battle of Britain, individual pilots demonstrated remarkable skill and courage, achieving extraordinary success in their Spitfires. Many of these pilots became legendary figures within the RAF, celebrated for their bravery and impressive combat records. Flight Lieutenant Alan Deere was one such pilot, renowned for his resilience. He not only survived multiple harrowing experiences, including being shot down and executing several forced landings, but also went on to destroy 17 German aircraft during the battle. And he concluded the war as a wing commander with a total of 22 victories. Sailor Malan, a South African ace, gained fame early in the war by shooting down 6 German aircraft within just 7 days during the Battle of France. By the end of the Battle of Britain, he had added 9 more victories to his tally, earning a bar to his DFC. Malan's total kills would reach 32 by 1941, along with recognition that included the Distinguished Service Order, DSO, and bar. Robert Stanford Tuck showcased his versatility by flying both Hurricanes and Spitfires during the battle, achieving a total of 12 confirmed kills. Although he initially showed little aptitude during training, his combat performance highlighted him as an exceptional fighter pilot. By the war's conclusion, Tuck had amassed 29 victories and earned both the DSO and 2 bars to his DFC. As the summer of 1940 transitioned from July to August, the Luftwaffe's assault began to wane. This decline in attacks was attributed not only to periods of adverse weather, but also to the German Air Force consolidating its strength in preparation for a significant offensive. The Luftwaffe's assault on Britain intensified dramatically starting August 12, 1940, marking a critical turning point in the Battle of Britain. The phase began with a series of increasingly severe raids, targeting British radar stations, airfields, and aircraft factories, which were essential for the RAF's defense. Eagle Day, as Hermann Goering named August 15, saw the Luftwaffe launch an unprecedented attack, executing more than 1,790 sorties in a single day across 5 major strikes. While RAF pilots demonstrated remarkable bravery, shooting down 75 German aircraft, the cost was steep. Fighter Command lost 30 Spitfires and Hurricanes, along with 17 pilots. By August 18, the situation had become dire, with Fighter Command having lost a total of 183 aircraft in combat, plus 30 more on the ground. These losses exceeded the rate at which the RAF could replace them, leading to a precarious situation. Even more alarming was the attrition of experienced personnel. Losses among squadron and flight commanders reached critical levels, and replacement pilots were being thrust into combat with minimal training. If this pattern of attrition continued, Fighter Command faced the grim reality of being utterly decimated within a matter of weeks. A temporary lull in operations due to bad weather offered little solace, as the Luftwaffe soon resumed its offensive with renewed vigor. Between August 24th and September 6th, they averaged nearly 1,000 sorties a day, relentlessly testing the limits of Fighter Command's endurance. During this harrowing period, RAF pilots fought against overwhelming odds, and the cumulative strain of relentless combat began to take its toll. As Fighter Command faced what seemed to be an inevitable extinction, Sir Hugh Dowding's call for a miracle was answered on September 7, 1940. On that day, 1,000 German aircraft, including over 300 bombers, assembled for the Luftwaffe's first significant raid on London. Adolf Hitler, enraged by recent RAF attacks on Berlin, had ordered Hermann Goering to concentrate efforts on destroying the British capital. While this offensive would bring tragedy to thousands of Londoners, it ultimately became a pivotal turning point for fighter command. With the focus of the German air campaign shifting to a single, predictable target, the pressure on RAF airfields was relieved. This change allowed exhausted pilots to reduce the number of sorties they flew while still meeting the Luftwaffe in greater strength. During the second phase of the battle, from September 7 to September 15, RAF fighters could engage the German air fleets with numbers as high as 300 at a time. Luftwaffe airmen, previously confident that the RAF was down to its last 50 Spitfires, were taken aback by the British response. As the Luftwaffe's bombers faced increasing resistance, Hermann Göring, frustrated by his bombers' significant losses, ordered the Messerschmitt 109 escorts to remain close to the bombers at all times. This directive limited the fighters' ability to maneuver freely and left them vulnerable as they were unable to engage in effective dogfights. The Spitfires, with their superior agility and tight turns, were granted a crucial advantage in the ensuing skirmishes. In the 9 days culminating on September 15, the RAF achieved a significant victory, shooting down 321 German aircraft at the cost of 174 British fighters. By this time, British production of Spitfires and Hurricanes had ramped up to the extent that it was outpacing the losses sustained in combat. The implications of this decisive turn in the battle were not lost on Adolf Hitler. The Luftwaffe's failure to achieve air superiority over Britain became evident, and this realization marked a significant shift in the strategic landscape of the war. With the RAF demonstrating resilience and superiority in combat, the Battle of Britain began to turn in the favor of the British, laying the groundwork for continued resistance against the Nazi threat. The Supermarine Spitfire's legacy was solidified during and after the Battle of Britain, where it not only played a crucial role in defending Britain, but also became a symbol of resilience and determination. The Spitfire II introduced significant upgrades over its predecessor, enhancing its combat effectiveness. Powered by the Rolls-Royce Merlin 12 engine, the Spitfire II provided a notable increase in horsepower, reaching 1,175 horsepower, which improved both speed and climb rate. Mark IIA, while a number of Mark IIBs were equipped with two 20mm Hispano cannon, significantly enhancing its firepower against enemy aircraft. Despite the introduction of the Spitfire II, the next variants, Marks III and IV, did not see full-scale production. In January 1941, the Messerschmitt 109F entered Luftwaffe service, proving significantly superior to the Spitfire II at altitudes above 20,000 feet. In response, Supermarine upgraded the design by fitting the Merlin 45 engine to a strengthened Spitfire 1 airframe, resulting in the creation of the Spitfire 5, which would become the most numerous of all Spitfire marks. The Spitfire 5 entered service in February 1941, boasting a top speed of 375 miles per hour and an operating ceiling of 36,500 feet. To enhance roll rate and speed at low levels, some aircraft featured clipped wingtips. By this time, the various subtypes of the Spitfire were classified based on the type of wing fitted. The A-wing configuration mounted 4 303 Browning machine guns, while the B-wing could accommodate a single 20mm Hispano cannon alongside 2 machine guns. The C-wing was the most versatile, allowing for multiple configurations. It could carry either 2 cannon, 1 cannon with 2 machine guns, with the second cannon muzzle fairing blanked off, or the original 4 machine guns. This adaptability made the Spitfire 5 a formidable adversary in the skies over Europe. This Spitfire 5 played a crucial role in turning the tide during the Battle of Malta in mid-1942. The island, positioned strategically along the Axis lines of communication between North Africa and Italy, was a prime target for German and Italian bombers. The successful defense of Malta established a vital RAF base for offensive operations against Axis airfields. From Malta, the Spitfire made its debut as a fighter-bomber during the summer of 1942, with the Mark 5C variant serving with great success in the Mediterranean and northern fronts throughout the war. In 1942, Allied airmen increasingly encountered the German Focke-Wulf 190, which decisively outclassed the Spitfire Mark V, the finest fighter in service at that time. Although a small number of Mark VI aircraft had been produced, it was evident that only a radically improved version of the Spitfire could effectively combat the Focke-Wulf threat.
We also had to make sure that we were keeping one step ahead of the enemy. And when the Focke-Wulf 190 came around, we had to increase the maneuverability of the aircraft. We actually added power-assisted ailerons. Like the power-assisted steering you got on your motor car now, but we were doing that on airplanes long before they thought of putting them in motor cars.
Supermarine's response was the introduction of the Mark 7, 8, and 9, with the Mark 9 becoming the most numerous. The Spitfire Mark 9 combined the Merlin 60 series engine with a 5C airframe, featuring a two-stage supercharger with an aftercooler. This innovation enabled the aircraft to achieve a top speed of over 400 miles per hour and a service ceiling of 44,000 feet. In 1944, many Mark 9s were upgraded with a new wing design known as the E-type, which housed a 20mm cannon and a 50 caliber machine gun. No German or Japanese aircraft could withstand the firepower of two 50 caliber machine guns, and combined with the Mark 9's exceptional performance, this made it an immensely powerful fighter. The Mark 9 Spitfire remained in production long after it had been outperformed by newer variants. By the end of the war, a total of 5,739 Mark 9s had been built. Among these, one of the most unusual was a seaplane conversion that successfully completed trials in 1943, reminiscent of the Spitfire's origins in the Schneider Cup races. However, this seaplane variant was never put into production. Following the Mark 9, the next significant development was the Mark 14, which was powered by a Rolls-Royce Griffin engine. The Griffin had been first fitted to an experimental Spitfire Mark IV in late 1941. The Mark 14 was introduced in October 1944 and featured a Griffin 65 engine rated at 2,035 horsepower, necessitating a 5-bladed propeller to harness its immense power. The Mark 14 boasted a maximum speed of 439 miles per hour and a service ceiling of 43,000 feet, making it undoubtedly the most potent Spitfire of the war. It also marked the final evolution of the Spitfire during World War II. The Spitfire Mark 18, a strengthened and upgraded variant of the Mark 14, was introduced just as the war came to an end. It represented the latest fighter development of the original Spitfire airframe. Subsequent variants, the Spitfires 21 to 24, were nearly entirely new aircraft, sharing few components with their predecessors. Even Reginald Mitchell's original wing design underwent radical changes. In March 1954, Mark 18Es flew the final offensive sorties by Spitfires in RAF service in Malaya, marking the end of a remarkable career that lasted an astonishing 16 years. This legacy stands as a testament to one of the most inspired designs in the history of military aviation.